Hello and welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, we're going to dive right into this because the geopolitical landscape right now is shifting incredibly fast. As we speak, a hard-fought, really fragile 2-month ceasefire is violently unraveling. And what makes this whole situation so captivating, and honestly so volatile, is that this unraveling is happening across two entirely distinct geographic fronts, all over the course of just a single weekend. We are looking at a highly complex web where military escalation and high-stakes diplomacy are literally colliding in real time. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the fragile ceasefire. Next, the specific clashes in the Gulf, followed by the sudden escalation in Lebanon. After that, we'll untangle the whole diplomatic web, and finally, we'll examine the immediate civilian impact.
All right, Section 1. The fragile ceasefire, a weekend of chaos.
The absolute crucial point to understand right out of the gate here is the macro-level stakes. For the past 2 months, a regional ceasefire agreement has been in place. It's essentially been trying to cap this boiling pot of tensions involving the US, Iran, Israel, and Lebanon. But, agreements on paper are really only as strong as the actions on the ground. Over this past weekend, the weight of simultaneous military actions in both the Gulf and the Levant has placed unprecedented strain on this agreement. We are seeing firsthand how unbelievably quickly a hard-fought peace can be tested when pressure is applied to multiple borders at the exact same time. For anyone watching global markets or international security, this is a prime example of how localized friction can instantly threaten the whole global stability picture.
Moving on to Section 2, clashes in the Gulf, tit for tat.
The timeline of this escalation near the Strait of Hormuz will seriously give you whiplash. On Saturday, the U.S. military carried out strikes on Kish Island and the small city of Guruk. These targets included Iranian radar, a ground control station, and command and control sites for drones. Then, rolling right into Sunday, the tensions spiked even further as sirens sounded across Kuwait, which is where a major U.S. airbase is located, with reports of intercepted missiles and drones. This rapid back-and-forth timeline over just 48 hours is basically a textbook example of how fast regional stability can deteriorate.
Now, what's crucial to understand here is how the U.S. is framing its actions. According to a statement from U.S. Central Command, they're describing their strikes strictly as self-defense. They stated that the actions were measured and deliberate responses to aggressive Iranian actions. Specifically, the U.S. points to the shooting down of an American drone that was operating over international waters, as well as the threat that Iranian one-way attack drones pose to commercial shipping transiting those regional waters. The U.S. was also very careful to emphasize that no American service members were harmed during their operation. But on the flip side, we have to look at the response from Iran to really grasp the full picture. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard issued a very direct warning. They stated that if the aggression is repeated, their response will be completely different in the scale and nature, placing the responsibility squarely on the U.S. They also claimed to have struck a U.S. airbase from which the American attacks had been launched. This stark exchange of military action, paired with these severe rhetorical warnings, just perfectly illustrates the sheer fragility of the current situation in the Gulf. Okay, Section 3. Escalation in Lebanon, Israel's new push. In our second geographic theater, we're seeing a glaring contradiction between diplomatic intentions and military reality. On one hand, the U.S. diplomatic goal, championed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, proposed a gradual de-escalation, and that would explicitly start by sparing the Lebanese capital of Beirut from attacks. But totally contradicting this is the immediate Israeli military action. Just hours later, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the IDF to carry out fresh strikes directly on Beirut's southern suburb of Dahi, citing repeated Hezbollah violations of the ceasefire. And we have to note, this isn't just about airstrikes, it's also about a significant ground expansion. This number, 18 years, carries immense historical weight. In southern Lebanon, Israel has pivoted from just seizing territory to occupying really important historical landmarks. These are positions that they previously occupied for nearly 2 decades, from 1982 until 2000. So by advancing into these specific historical zones, Israel is sending a loud and clear message that they are not stepping back despite all the international efforts to calm the region down. And the international pushback to this escalation in Lebanon, it's been incredibly rapid. Major European allies like France, Germany, and the UK have openly criticized Israel's push further into southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is treating this with the utmost urgency, scheduling an emergency meeting today just to address the collapsing situation on the ground. So let's take a breath here. We have bombs dropping in the Gulf and fresh strikes ordered in Beirut, which naturally leads us to a critical question. How on earth does military escalation on two completely separate fronts impact the complex, behind-the-scenes peace talks? Let's untangle that in Section 4, the diplomatic web tying the fronts together. Breaking down these interconnected demands reveals exactly why this situation is so incredibly difficult to resolve. It's like a giant puzzle. First, despite all the weekend strikes, US-Iran message exchanges are actually still actively ongoing. The Iranian foreign minister confirmed this, though he did note a current lack of trust. Second, the negotiations are shifting rapidly. Reports indicate President Trump requested edits to the proposed Memorandum of Understanding, specifically wanting tougher language regarding the Strait of Hormuz and the removal of highly enriched uranium. But here is exactly where the two fronts violently collide. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson reiterated that a ceasefire in Lebanon is an integral, non-negotiable part of any regional deal with the U.S. Conversely, many observers note that Israel is escalating its campaign in Lebanon precisely to separate these two files. The theory is that Israel wants to ensure its fight against Hezbollah continues entirely on its own terms, totally independent of whether the U.S. and Iran actually reach an agreement. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the civilian impact, nowhere to go. To really ground this geopolitical analysis, we have to look at the grim reality on the ground in Lebanon. It's a story of impossible choices. Israel has issued continuous evacuation orders over the past few days, particularly starting in the southern city of Tyre. Civilians pack up whatever they can and flee north to cities like Sidon. But Sidon is now reporting that it is at absolute full capacity. They simply cannot take any more displaced people. So families are being forced to flee even further north, instructed to seek safety in the capital city of Beirut or way up into the mountains. It is just a grueling, impossible journey of continuous displacement. And that brings us to the tragic paradox of this entire situation. Just as tens of thousands of displaced civilians have fled north seeking a safe haven in Beirut, fresh strikes has now been ordered on Beirut's southern Dahi neighborhood. People who have already lost their homes, who have traveled miles to escape the war front, are now finding themselves right back in the crosshairs. This is creating total panic with absolutely no clue where to go or when they might ever be able to return home. We've seen today how fragile agreements in the Gulf and Lebanon are violently unraveling, driven by completely contradicting military and diplomatic goals. So I want to leave you with this final pressing thought. As these military objectives violently collide with ongoing diplomatic efforts, what is going to break first? Is it the high-stakes negotiations or the civilians caught in the crossfire? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.